I stood frozen in the corner of the banquet hall, the shimmering crystal chandelier overhead seeming to mock my sense of isolation. Napa Valley, with its endless vineyards and the sweet aroma of wine in the air, was supposed to be the place where I would celebrate my younger brother, Ethan. His wedding to Olivia Bennett, the golden girl of a prestigious family, was held at the most luxurious resort in the region. But now, this opulent banquet hall was no longer a place for congratulations. It had become a battlefield, and I, Michael, was merely a witness to the unraveling of our family. The lilting strains of the violin abruptly ceased. The room fell deathly silent. Hundreds of guests, clad in expensive tuxedos and sparkling evening gowns, turned their eyes to the center of the hall. Olivia, the bride in her resplendent wedding gown, glared at Ethan with eyes brimming with hatred. She had just learned the truth. Ethan didn't love her. He only wanted her family's wealth. Slowly, she removed her wedding ring and flung it to the floor. The faint but sharp sound of metal striking wood echoed through the room like a death knell for a marriage that had never truly begun. I am Michael, 35 years old, a software engineer living in Chicago with a small apartment and a simple life. That day was a significant one. I wore a navy blue suit with a carefully knotted silk tie. I drove through the winding roads of Napa Valley, the late afternoon sunlight glinting off the endless vineyards. The scent of dry grass and ripe grapes mingled in the air, a reminder that I was in a place meant for extravagant dreams. But in my heart, there was only a heavy feeling. I had come to attend the wedding of Ethan, my younger brother, to Olivia Bennett, the golden girl of the region's most prestigious family. I wanted to bless him, to be the devoted older brother I had always been. But deep down, I knew I was stepping into a world where I didn't belong. The resort came into view, a white stone castle with soaring columns and shimmering glass windows. I parked the car, handed the keys to the valet, and stepped into the grand lobby. The space was filled with the fragrance of white roses and polished wood. Persian rugs stretched beneath my feet, leading to the banquet hall where hundreds of guests were gathering. The sound of laughter, clinking wine glasses, and the lilting strains of a violin filled the air. This was Ethan's world, lavish, glamorous, and with no place for me. I felt out of place here. I didn't belong to the conversations about stocks or real estate that the guests were engrossed in. I didn't have Ethan's grand ambitions or the powerful connections of our parents. I just wanted my family to see me, even if only once. Ethan, 30 years old, was the star of the family. He always knew how to shine, with a confident smile, sharp eyes, and a way with words that made everyone take notice. He worked at a venture capital firm, securing multi-million-dollar deals, and now he was about to marry Olivia Bennett. The Bennett family owned a wine empire with mansions in Napa and bank accounts that someone like me could only dream of. Ethan had once told me in a rare moment of candor that Olivia was his golden ticket. At the time, I thought he was joking. Now I wasn't so sure. I entered the reception area where a gold-embossed sign listed the guests' names. I looked for mine, Michael Harper. It wasn't there. I asked a young staff member in uniform, a girl with a polite smile. "Oh, Mr. Harper," she said, her voice slightly hesitant. "Your seat. It's in the auxiliary area near the hallway. I'll show you the way." I nodded, suppressing the pang in my chest. The auxiliary area. Of course. As I passed through the main hall, I saw my mother, Caroline, in an emerald silk gown, chatting with a group of women. She was beaming, as if this were the happiest day of her life. My father, Charles, stood beside her, holding a glass of wine, nodding along with some tycoon. They didn't see me. I didn't expect them to. I was used to being invisible to my family. I thought about the years growing up with Ethan. He was always the center of attention. The spoiled younger brother, praised for everything from his grades to the way he played soccer. I, on the other hand, was the reliable one. My mother once said she never had to worry about me because I always knew how to manage. But the truth was, I didn't want to manage alone. I wanted to be seen, to be loved, the way they loved Ethan. When I reached the auxiliary area, I saw a few small tables pushed against the wall near the coat check. No fresh flowers, no candles, just plain white tablecloths. I sat down looking into the main hall through a glass door. There, Ethan was shaking hands with guests, his smile radiant as the sun. Olivia stood beside him, her wedding gown sparkling, her eyes gentle yet sharp. They were the perfect picture, and I was a blur outside the frame. I told myself not to care. I was here for Ethan, for the family. But as I looked at the lavish tables in the main hall adorned with white roses and crystal chandeliers, I couldn't stop the aching feeling. I had hoped, even if just this once, that my family would see me as part of them. But today, like every other day, I was just an outsider. I sat at the small table, my fingers tracing the edge of the tablecloth, trying to focus on the glass of water in front of me. The sound of the violin from the main hall drifted over, mingling with the laughter and chatter of the crowd. Through the glass door, I saw my mother adjusting Olivia's shawl, her eyes tender as if she were looking at her own daughter. My father was patting Ethan on the shoulder, laughing heartily at some joke. They were a family, but I wasn't part of it. A server approached, placing a simple salad plate in front of me. I glanced toward the main hall, where appetizers were presented like works of art: lobster, caviar, and sparkling glasses of wine. I wasn't angry at the server, they were just doing their job. But the feeling of being pushed to the sidelines, as if I weren't worthy of what my family was enjoying, tightened my chest. I stood up, determined to find my mother. Maybe I could say something, even just a greeting. I entered the main hall, weaving through groups of guests engaged in lively conversation. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and wine. I spotted my mother near the head table, adjusting a bouquet of roses. "Mom," I called, my voice soft but clear. She turned, the smile on her face fading. "Michael, there you are," she said, her tone light but lacking warmth. "Are you okay? I'm terribly busy taking care of Olivia and the guests." I nodded, swallowing the pang that rose within me. "I just wanted to ask, why am I seated in the hallway? I'm Ethan's brother." My mother frowned, as if my question were an inconvenience. "Oh, Michael, don't make a fuss. The main hall is for close family and Ethan's important friends. You know he needs to make a good impression on the Bennetts." She turned away, resuming her work with the flowers, as if I were no longer there. I stood frozen, her words hitting me like a slap. Close family, wasn't I close family? I turned and caught my father's eye. He was talking to an older man, but when he saw me, he gave only a slight nod, signaling me not to interrupt. I felt like a child abandoned in the middle of a crowd. With a final resolve, I sought out Ethan. He was standing near the gift table, laughing with a group of friends. "Ethan," I called, pushing past a few people. He turned, his smile fading when he saw me. "Michael, what's up? You look way too stressed." "I'm seated in the hallway," I said bluntly, my voice low but firm. "Near the coat check. You think that's okay?" Ethan burst out laughing as if I'd just told a joke. "My God, are you serious? Be grateful you were invited at all. You know how important today is for me." He clapped me on the shoulder, then turned back to his friends as if I were just a passing breeze. I stood there, humiliation crushing my chest. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I was his brother, that I had sacrificed so much to keep this family together. But I said nothing. I returned to my table, sat down and stared out the window. The vineyards outside were still beautiful, but they couldn't soothe the bleeding wound inside me. I returned to the small table near the coat check, the light from the main hall filtering through the glass door, casting shimmering fragments onto the water glass in front of me. The laughter and violin music still echoed, but they felt distant, as if they belonged to a world I could never touch. I gazed outside, where the Napa Valley vineyards stretched under the glow of the sunset, and suddenly memories flooded back. Not joyful ones, not the evenings playing catch with Ethan or the times Mom baked cookies for us both. The memory that came was a deep, sharp, and painful cut. I remembered my 30th birthday 5 years ago. I had hoped even just a little that my family would remember. I didn't need a party or expensive gifts, just a dinner, a phone call, or even a hug. But that day, our house was aglow with lights and laughter, not for me. Ethan had just been promoted at his venture capital firm, and our parents decided to throw a grand party to celebrate him. They invited his friends, colleagues, and even neighbors I'd never spoken to. The dining table overflowed with fresh flowers, roasted beef, and expensive wine, all for Ethan. I sat in the corner of the living room holding a glass of water, watching everyone raise their glasses to toast my younger brother. Mom rushed by, carrying a tray of pastries, her smile radiant. "Michael, can you help me bring this out?" she said, not once meeting my eyes. I nodded, did as she asked, like a spare part in the house I grew up in. When the party was nearly over, I mustered the courage to ask her, my voice small as if afraid to intrude. "Mom, it's my birthday today. Did everyone forget?" She paused, still holding a dishcloth, her eyes flickering with brief confusion. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry. We were so busy, it slipped my mind." She smiled as if it were a minor oversight. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'll make it up to you later." But there was no later. 2 days later, I received a text from her, brief and cold. "Happy birthday, was too busy and forgot." No explanation, no phone call. I texted back, trying to keep my tone light. "Mom, I'm a bit sad that no one remembered." She replied immediately, but each word felt like a knife. "Michael, don't be so sensitive. Ethan needs support. He's under a lot of pressure in his career. You're always stable. I don't worry about you." Stable. That word pierced my heart, leaving a wound that never healed. I was stable, so I didn't need to be loved. I was stable, so I didn't deserve to be remembered. That memory wasn't the first. When I graduated college, my parents arrived late because Ethan had a basketball game. When I got a promotion at my software company, they nodded briefly, then turned to brag about Ethan's latest $1 million deal. I was always in the background, the stable one who didn't need attention. But I wasn't stable. I was lonely, in my own family. I looked back at the banquet hall where Ethan was laughing with the guests. He was still the center of it all, as he had been for years. I wondered if he ever realized how much I had sacrificed. The times I stepped back, the times I stayed silent so he could shine. But today, sitting at this table, surrounded by the cold distance of my family, I knew the answer. He never noticed. And perhaps he never cared. I stood up, taking a deep breath. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to keep being Ethan's shadow or the family's afterthought. I would find him, say my final words, and leave. Napa Valley was beautiful, but it wasn't a place for me. I wove through the crowd in the banquet hall, dodging curious glances and polite smiles. The violin's lilting melody continued, but it couldn't drown out the pounding of my heart in my chest. I spotted Ethan near the gift table, laughing heartily with an older man, likely a business associate. His smile was radiant, confident, as if the entire world was in his grasp. I paused, took a deep breath, and approached. "Ethan," I called, my voice just loud enough for him to hear. He turned, his smile fading slightly when he saw me. "Michael, what's up now?" His tone was light, but I could hear the undercurrent of impatience. "I need to talk," I said, looking him straight in the eyes. "Privately." Ethan frowned but nodded, gesturing for me to follow. We left the main hall, stepping into a quiet corner near the hallway, where there were only a few velvet-upholstered chairs and a window overlooking the vineyards. The sunset bathed the space in golden light, but it did nothing to ease the heaviness inside me. "What's this about, man?" Ethan asked, crossing his arms, his tone slightly mocking. "Don't tell me you're still mad about the seating arrangement. Seriously?" I looked at him, the younger brother I had once loved and protected. But now I saw only a stranger. "I'm leaving, Ethan," I said, my voice hoarse but clear. "I don't belong here. I just want to say a few things before I go." Ethan scoffed, shaking his head. "Leaving? Are you kidding? This is my wedding, Michael. You can't just walk out because you feel hurt." He emphasized hurt as if it were a punchline. I didn't respond. I gazed out the window where the vineyard stretched like a promise of peace I'd never known. "Ethan," I continued, my voice slow and deliberate, Marrying Olivia is a big step. The Bennetts aren't like us. They have money, power, and expectations. If you want to fit in with them, you need to be sincere. Don't try to play games because they'll see through it. And Olivia, she's smart. She deserves respect. Ethan burst out laughing, the sound so loud it startled me. Sincere? Oh, Michael, you're so naive. I've got everything under control. Olivia loves me, her family trusts me. I know how to make them depend on me, especially Olivia. She'll think I'm the perfect husband, and when the time comes, the Bennett fortune will be mine. He smirked, his eyes glinting with smug satisfaction. Don't worry, big brother. I'm playing this game well. I was stunned, not by his plan. I'd suspected it for a while, but by the brazenness in his voice. He showed no remorse, no hesitation. Ethan, I said, my voice trembling with anger and pain, don't you see how wrong this is? Olivia loves you. She's not a pawn. Ethan shrugged. That's life, man. Smart people know how to win. You should learn that instead of sulking at some corner table. He clapped me on the shoulder, then turned to leave as if our conversation was nothing more than a minor annoyance. I stood there, watching his silhouette disappear into the banquet hall. In the quiet of the hallway, I caught the faint sound of footsteps. I turned and saw a figure slip by, white dress, hair pinned up. Olivia. My heart sank. Had she overheard? I wasn't sure, but the fleeting glance she cast, sharp and laced with suspicion, told me everything was about to change. I lingered in the corner of the hallway for a moment longer. The sunset outside the window casting a golden hue over the Napa Valley vineyards, but it couldn't calm the storm raging inside me. Ethan's words, smug, cold, and calculating, still echoed in my mind. The Bennett fortune will be mine. I wanted to believe he was just boasting, that he wasn't truly that heartless. But his eyes, devoid of remorse, had shattered any hope. I no longer recognized my brother. The soft click of high heels approaching pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Olivia standing there, her white wedding gown shimmering under the hallway lights. Her hair was elegantly pinned up, with a few loose curls framing her face, but her eyes no longer held the tenderness they had when she stood beside Ethan. They were sharp, filled with suspicion, and it made my heart sink. She had overheard, not everything, but enough to bring her to me. Michael, she said, her voice low but trembling slightly as if she were struggling to hold herself together. I need you to tell me the truth. What did Ethan say to you? About me, about my family? She stepped closer, her hands clenched, her gaze locked onto mine as if searching for the truth in every breath I took. I hesitated, not because I wanted to protect Ethan, he didn't deserve it, but because I was afraid. Afraid that speaking would destroy everything, that it would shatter my family, cold as they were to me, beyond repair. But when I looked into Olivia's eyes, I saw her pain. She wasn't just Ethan's bride, not just a Bennett heiress. She was a person standing on the edge of an abyss, and I couldn't let her fall. Olivia, I began, my voice hoarse, I don't want to hurt you, but you need to know. I took a deep breath, my gaze drifting to the vineyards for a flicker of courage. Ethan bragged that he'd make you emotionally dependent on him. He said he'd play the perfect husband to win your family's trust. And then, he wants the Bennett fortune. Olivia froze, her hands dropping to her sides. He said that? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, guilt weighing heavily on me. I'm sorry, Olivia, I told him to be sincere, but he didn't listen. She turned away, staring out the window, her shoulders trembling slightly. I thought she might cry, but when she faced me again, her eyes were harder than ever. I need to be sure, she said, pulling her phone from a small beaded clutch attached to her gown. I can't just believe it right away. Not because of you, Michael, but because I loved him. The word loved came out like a wound, and I understood her pain more deeply than I expected. Olivia called the Bennett family lawyer, her voice calm but razor sharp. I stood there, catching fragments of the conversation. Yes, I need to know now. Ethan Harper, the prenuptial agreement. She fell silent, her eyes darkening as the lawyer responded. When she hung up, she looked at me, her voice icy. Ethan asked the lawyer about ways to break the prenup to gain access to family assets in case of a divorce. He did it behind my back. I said nothing. The truth was speaking for itself. But Olivia wasn't done. She called Ryan, Ethan's best friend, who was somewhere in the crowd at the reception. She put the call on speaker, her voice cutting like a blade. "Ryan, I know Ethan's plan," she said, wasting no words. "He's manipulating me to get the Bennett fortune. You knew about this, didn't you?" Ryan stammered, trying to deflect, but Olivia didn't let him off. "Don't lie. If you don't tell the truth, my family will make you pay dearly. Choose." Under pressure, Ryan's voice broke. "All right. Ethan bragged that marrying you was his big bet. He said he'd change his life with the Bennett wealth. I didn't think he was serious." Olivia ended the call, her hands trembling, but her eyes now burned with fury. "Michael," she said, her voice now resolute. "Thank you. You didn't have to speak, but you did. I won't let Ethan destroy my family." She turned, her wedding gown gliding softly across the floor, but her steps were firm like those of a warrior. I stood there, feeling both relieved and burdened. I had done the right thing, but why did my heart still ache? I returned to the banquet hall, but didn't enter. I stood at the entrance, watching Ethan laugh and chat with guests, oblivious to the storm approaching. Olivia had disappeared into a small meeting room at the end of the hallway, and I knew she was preparing for the inevitable. I wanted to leave, to walk away from it all, but a part of me was still tethered to this family, even though they had never truly seen me as one of them. An hour later, I was summoned to a small meeting room in the resort. The heavy wooden door closed behind me, sealing off the opulent sounds of the banquet hall outside. Inside, the dim golden light cast a soft glow on a long wooden table. Olivia sat at the head, her wedding gown still shimmering, but her eyes now burned with righteous anger. Ethan stood in the corner, arms crossed tightly, his face flushed. My mother, Caroline, sat beside my father, Charles, both looking as though they'd been dragged into a nightmare. I stood near the door, not sitting, feeling like an outsider in my own story. "Michael," Olivia said, her voice calm but razor sharp. "Tell us what you heard Ethan say." She looked at me, not with suspicion, but with a trust I had never received from my own family. I took a deep breath, my gaze flickering to Ethan. He shook his head as if to stop me, but I didn't falter. "Ethan said he would make Olivia dependent on him to manipulate her and her family," I said, my voice hoarse but clear. "He bragged about playing the perfect husband to win their trust, then taking the Bennett fortune." Each word landed like a hammer, and I saw my mother cover her face, my father bowing his head. Ethan lunged forward, pointing at me. "You're lying. You're jealous of me, Michael. You've always been jealous." His voice cracked, not with pain, but with fury. Olivia raised a hand, silencing him. "Enough, Ethan," she said, pulling a short recording from her clutch. The call with Ryan. Ryan's voice echoed, repeating Ethan's boast about his big bet. Then she placed a document on the table, an email from the lawyer confirming Ethan's inquiries about breaking the prenuptial agreement. My mother sobbed, but not for Olivia or me. "Ethan, how could you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling. My father gripped her hand, but his eyes remained on Ethan, searching for an explanation that could salvage the moment. Ethan slumped into a chair, hands clutching his head. I just wanted us to have a better life," he mumbled. But no one believed him. Olivia stood, her gaze sweeping the room. "The wedding is canceled. Ethan, you leave now." She turned to me, her voice softer. "Michael, thank you." I nodded, saying nothing. My mother turned to me, her eyes red and swollen. "Michael, how could you do this to your brother?" Her words were a final dagger, but I didn't feel the pain. I felt only emptiness. I walked out of the room, leaving them with the truth. The door closed behind me, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe. I stood outside the meeting room, my back against the wall, my breathing still heavy from the confrontation. The closed wooden door couldn't block my mother's sobs from seeping through, but I didn't turn back. I had spoken the truth, and though it pierced my heart, I had no regrets. The banquet hall at the end of the hallway still glowed with chandelier light, the violin's melody lilting as if oblivious to the storm that had just erupted. But I knew it was coming. The meeting room door swung open. Ethan burst out, his face flushed, eyes wild. "I won't let it end like this," he shouted, his steps unsteady as he stormed toward the banquet hall. Olivia followed close behind, her wedding gown gliding softly but her strides resolute. My parents trailed silently, my mother covering her face, my father's head bowed like lost ghosts. I followed last, not wanting to dive deeper but my feet carrying me toward the shimmering light of the hall. Ethan shoved open the banquet hall doors, the wood slamming with a thud that startled the guests. The violin fell silent, a deathly hush blanketing the room. Hundreds of eyes, expensive tuxedos, glittering evening gowns, turned to him. "It's all lies," Ethan screamed, his voice breaking, pointing at Olivia. "She and Michael set me up. They're jealous of me, of us." He turned to the crowd, desperate for support, but met only cold stares. Olivia stepped onto the decorated platform where the 5-tiered wedding cake stood like a bitter mockery. She raised a hand, commanding silence. "I'm sorry for interrupting," she said, her voice low but resonant. "But you all deserve the truth." She looked directly at the crowd, her gaze unwavering. "Ethan Harper doesn't love me. He planned to manipulate me and seize my family's fortune. I have proof. From our lawyer, from his own words to his brother, and from his best friend." Olivia presented the evidence methodically before the entire gathering. The hall erupted in murmurs that grew into loud voices, shocked and disdainful gazes fixed on Ethan. I glanced at Olivia's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, seated at the head table. Edward Bennett, a tall man with silver hair, gripped his wife Lillian's hand tightly. His face was flushed, not with anger but with humiliation. I saw him squeeze Lillian's hand harder as if to keep her from breaking. Lillian, elegant in a lilac silk gown, covered her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. "How dare he?" she whispered, her voice cracking loud enough for me to hear from a few meters away. "We welcomed him like our own." Edward bowed his head, his eyes reflecting deep disappointment, not just in Ethan but in himself for trusting him. The guests, members of the elite who knew the Bennetts, began to turn away. An older man, likely a business associate, shook his head and stood to leave. Others followed, the sound of shoes on the wooden floor like the drumbeat of Ethan's unraveling. He stood in the center of the hall, hands clutching his head, muttering, "No, no, no." But no one listened. The perfect image he'd crafted, the golden boy, the ideal husband, shattered like crystal on the floor. Olivia stepped down from the platform, her gaze lingering on Ethan one final time. "You chose this path," she said, then removed her wedding ring and flung it to the floor. The faint, sharp sound of metal striking wood rang out, like a death knell for a marriage that never began. She turned to her parents, her eyes softening. "I'm sorry, Mom. Dad," she said, her voice catching. Lillian stood, embracing her tightly, while Edward only nodded, his gaze still fixed on Ethan with contempt. My mother sobbed, but not for Olivia or the Bennetts. She rushed to Ethan, wrapping her arms around him, whispering, "My boy, I'll fix this." My father stood beside her, silent, but his eyes avoided mine, as if I were the cause of this collapse. I stood at the hall's entrance, an emptiness enveloping me. I wanted to tell them I only spoke the truth, that I didn't mean to destroy anything. But I didn't. I was tired of trying to be seen. Olivia approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Michael, you don't have to stay," she said, her voice gentle but sincere. "Thank you again." I nodded, looking at her one last time before turning away. The banquet hall was nearly empty now, filled only with my mother's cries and Ethan's defeated silhouette. I stepped outside, the Napa Valley sunset still beautiful, but this time it didn't hurt. It felt like a promise of a new beginning. A week later, I sat in my small Chicago apartment, the light from the window spilling onto the old wooden table. The sound of traffic outside filtered in, but it didn't bother me like it used to. This apartment, with its plain white walls and bookshelves stuffed with novels, had once been my escape from the world. But now, it was home, a place where I was beginning to learn how to live for myself. The phone on the table buzzed incessantly. My mother had called for the 10th time that day, leaving long, pleading voicemails. "Michael, how could you do this to Ethan? He's falling apart. We're family. You can't turn your back on us." I listened to one message, then deleted them all. My father texted too, his words brief but cutting. "You've disappointed me." I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the block button, but I only turned the phone off. I was tired of their accusations, tired of apologizing for telling the truth. I stood and opened an old wooden box tucked under the bed. Inside were family keepsakes, a photo of Ethan and me playing catch as kids, a card from my mother when I graduated, my father's old basketball medal. I had once cherished them as proof that I belonged to them. But now, each item only stirred old wounds. I packed them back, locked the box, and shoved it into a corner of the closet. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need memories that reminded me I was never important enough. I thought about Ethan. News had spread quickly in Napa Valley's elite circles. He'd been fired from his venture capital firm. No one wanted to work with someone branded a manipulator. My mother called to say he'd moved back home, locking himself in his room all day, but I felt no pity. Ethan had chosen his path, and I was no longer responsible for carrying his consequences. Olivia had texted me a few days earlier, her message brief but warm. "Michael, thank you. I'm doing okay, and I hope you are too." I smiled as I read it, but didn't reply. She owed me nothing, and I didn't want to intrude on her new life. I was just glad she'd escaped Ethan as I was trying to escape my own family. I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Colorado. I'd always dreamed of hiking in the Rocky Mountains where no one knew me, where there were no accusing stares or crushing expectations. I imagined standing on a peak, the cold wind whipping past, and for the first time I wouldn't feel alone. Not because someone was beside me, but because I had chosen myself. That night I sat on the sofa, holding a cold cup of coffee, gazing out the window. Chicago sparkled with city lights, but they no longer made me feel lost. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to please my family, the times I stayed silent when overlooked, the times I let Ethan shine. I had thought it was love, duty, but now I understood that love isn't sacrificing yourself for recognition. Love is being seen, being respected, and if your family can't offer that, they aren't family. I stood and opened the window. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust. I breathed deeply, feeling like I was truly breathing for the first time in my life. I didn't need my mother's approval, my father's pride, or Ethan's acknowledgement. My worth wasn't tied to what they thought of me. It was here in my heart, in the steps I was about to take. I closed the window, turned off the light, and went to bed. For the first time in years, I slept soundly, free of dreams or worries. Colorado was waiting, and I knew it was just the beginning. I used to think family was everything, the place you belonged, where you found love and comfort. But I was wrong. Family doesn't always mean respect or understanding. Sometimes they're the ones who hurt you the most, not with actions, but with indifference. Walking away from toxic relationships is an act of courage. It doesn't mean you're giving up on love, it means you're choosing to love yourself. I learned that true family is those who see you, who lift you up instead of dragging you down. And if you don't find them in blood, you'll find them out there, in friends, in strangers, or within your own heart. I stepped out of my family's shadow not to run away, but to find myself. Colorado was the first stop, but the real journey was living a life where I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. Sometimes the best way to heal is to walk away, and I was ready.